There's a reason you always trust your gut. Your whole body's health depends on it. Did you know 70% of your immune system resides in your gut? Invest in your health with Seed's DSO1 Daily Symbiotic. DSO1 is formulated with 24 clinically and scientifically studied probiotic strains and a plant-based prebiotic to support whole body benefits. It works to promote healthy regularity and relief from occasional digestive discomfort and bloating. Seed's DSO1 Daily Symbiotic is also formulated to support a healthy immune system, and it even helps you look healthier and more vibrant on the outside by promoting smooth, clear, healthy skin. Invest in your whole body's health with Seed's DSO1 Daily Symbiotic. Go to seed.com/gut and use code 25GUT to get 25% off your first month. That's 25% off your first month of Seed's DSO1 Daily Symbiotic at seed.com/gut. Code 25GUT.
You may think your credit score isn't a big deal, but when your credit score increases, your opportunities do too, like loan approvals and lower interest rates. Chime makes it easier to build credit with a secured Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card. You can use it everywhere Visa credit cards are accepted. Chime helps you build your credit score safely by using your own money to make everyday purchases and on-time payments with a safer credit building feature enabled. To apply, just open a Chime checking account with a $200 qualifying direct deposit. And don't stress, there's no annual fee or credit check required to apply and get started. Build your credit history and find new opportunities with Credit Builder today. Get started at chime.com/build. That's chime.com/build. The Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card is issued by Stride Bank N.A., member FDIC. Chime checking account and a $200 qualifying direct deposit required to apply. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply. Call 1-844-244-6363 for details. On-time payment history may have a positive impact on your credit score. Late payment may negatively impact your credit score. Results may vary.
Katherine Chiljan and Mark Eddy joining us. Thank you guys so much for your time. Katherine, you've written an awesome book, Shakespeare Suppressed. You're going to tell us some things about Shakespeare that other people find just commonplace. Yeah, this is just the way Shakespeare is, but you have found things contrary to that, and I'm very excited to hear about them. And Mark Eddy, you have done some awesome booking work for the show, man. You've sent me some incredibly cool guests, and Katherine is no different, so I'm super grateful that you are joining us for this one as well. And if you don't mind, let's run around the table and do some intros for my audience that's not too familiar with you. I was raised well, so Katherine, if you don't mind, kick us off.
I'm Katherine Chiljan, and I have been interested in the Shakespeare authorship question since 1985, I think. It's been many years, decades of researching and studying it. And I was a UCLA history major just before I learned about this controversy. And that really got me going.
So why did you feel so compelled to Shakespeare in the first place? Why was that such a draw for you rather than like Escher or, Calvin and Bill Watterson or something like that, like investigating another author and seeing, something like that? I know those are two legitimate authors. What I mean by this is any other topic of interest for yours. What was Shakespeare? What was that pull?
Well, the initial pull was my English teacher, high school English. And she mentioned that there was some people who believed that Shakespeare was Christopher Marlowe. And that's all she said. And that stuck in my brain. And then when I came across a debate on the question with Charlton Ogburn and a Shakespeare professor, I thought, I'm going to watch it, and, that was it. I saw one man making perfect sense that the great author was somebody else, not the Stratford man. And he was debating, I believe, a Princeton professor of Shakespeare, and he couldn't defend his own candidate for the authorship.
It's so interesting because you find this in a lot of disciplines and with a lot of information. People just take it as, someone with an accolade said that, and so we're just going to roll with that. We're not even going to question it or look into it. And this is why putting things under the microscope like this is so cool.
Yes.
And I love that a seed like that was planted in you so that you can get to the bottom of this. Because then, I'll get there, but it makes me then want to know what else you've questioned in your life. But before we go any further, Mark, if you don't mind, introduce yourself for my audience, brother.
My name's Mark Eddy, and I host Nightlight on Barbara DeLong's network.
Hell yeah, you do. And Barbara DeLong, you actually have connected us with, and she is coming on very soon. We have her booked to come on in the very near future. So thank you again for that, my friend. So then let's jump into this further then. I want to know what you have then now, because of this, sort of broken open, and what has this mindset made you question in other areas of your life? Like if Shakespeare wasn't what we were told, then what else is going on?
Are you talking to Mark or me?
Oh, my apologies, Catherine. I should have addressed you first.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Could you say the question again?
Oh, yes. What other areas of your life have made you put under the microscope just simply because of your investigation into something that was very settled that you found to be something very different? Are there any other areas of your life that you've questioned to the same degree?
Not really. It's been mostly this.
Okay.
And it just, as soon as I learned about it, it just became my passion, and I wanted to tell everybody about it. And I wanted to learn as much as I could. And I'm still learning.
Yeah, of course, right? It's always expanding, because this is and this is your second edition, which is really cool. There was more. Yes. Outstanding. So, Mark, how did you and Katherine meet?
I contacted the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship to have someone do a show, and they put me in contact with Katherine, and we've been working together for 7 or 8 years.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah, really. If we can, and I kind of got into this. There's my proof of my interest in this, and I could date it to when the show aired on April 18th, 1989.
Wow.
So, and I just happened to be flipping through the channels at college, and since I was an English major, I was like, okay, this looks pretty interesting, and started watching it, and I thought it was a captivating topic, and ordered the transcript and just continued to plug along at this subject over the last I don't do math, but 30 years or so.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Very cool. And it's so interesting. So, Katherine, if you don't mind, blow our minds about Shakespeare. Just tell us some things we think we know that we don't.
Well, I often will ask people who I meet, what do you know about William Shakespeare? And what they'll typically say, oh, Romeo and Juliet, or they'll say he was an actor. And that's about all they know. And that's really amazing when you consider how famous he was in his own lifetime. He was greatly lauded, and his works were very influential. And why is it that we don't know more? And it's almost scandalous that we don't know anything about it. And if you get into it deeper, you're going to discover, and this is what I did, is that the person that we believe wrote the works, he was born in Stratford-on-Avon in 1564. There is absolutely no lifetime evidence that he was educated or was a writer. There's no payments to him as a writer. There's nothing in his handwriting as far as letters. We do have signatures, 6 signatures on his will. Well, not on his will, 3 on his will and 3 on other legal documents. But we don't have anything in his handwriting beyond that. He was born in an illiterate household. His parents could not read and write. And he himself never claimed he was an author, including his daughters and granddaughter. They never mentioned it. The town of Stratford-on-Avon never claimed that the great author came from there. It was over 100 years later that Stratford-on-Avon started to become famous as the birthplace, but that was after many years of nobody making that claim. So there's a lot of zeros in this Stratford man's life. To me, the biggest one is having no records of education.
Yeah, and an illiterate home. That's very interesting, the background. You'd think you'd be immersed, these works that we see and hear performed and how they're just held to such a stature of this quality.
There is so much learning in these works. Every single play and poem, it shows great familiarity with many, many topics, like ancient Greek, Latin, astronomy, rhetoric, the law, botany, things like that. That is not taught at your local grammar school. And that is, what a Shakespeare professor will typically say, oh, well, he picked it up, at his grammar school, or he picked it up at the Mermaid Tavern, something like that. But it's all very nebulous. And it's not reality, because we have records of people who attended Cambridge and Oxford and the law schools. And there is no William Shakespeare on any of them. To know about rhetoric, you had to have gone to Oxford or Cambridge. You had to have gone to a university. And no William Shakespeare on those rolls. And we don't even have a record in Stratford-on-Avon that the Stratford man attended there. The records don't survive for that period. But it doesn't look good. He was at a great disadvantage coming from an illiterate household. So those are some of the main things that you are blown away when you realize that. It's like, how is that possible?
So there's a lot of some people challenge the identity of someone, let's say like Jesus, for instance, where they say, well, these works that he did were written long after he was dead and gone. And so the story just sort of amplified, and it's this game of telephone. Is this what happened with Shakespeare? Was there anything involved with this person, or were the plays coming out and they just needed somebody to kind of go, you wrote it, and because of the timeline of when they were released?
No one claimed to have known the great author while the Stratford man was alive, or while whoever he was alive. And no one associated the great author with Stratford-on-Avon, that town. Nobody did. It happened almost exactly 400 years ago. This is the 400th anniversary of the first folio. That is a book of Shakespeare plays, 36 Shakespeare plays, and it's where that famous image of Shakespeare comes from. This is the opening. This is the opening pages. Yeah, they call it the first folio. Folio means a large page size. So it's a large book and of folios and 36 Shakespeare plays. And it's the opening pages that give us the impression, does not say openly, just gives us the impression that the author came from Stratford-on-Avon. How did they do that? Well, an opening poem by Ben Jonson mentions Sweet Swan of Avon. He calls Shakespeare Sweet Swan of Avon. So Avon, you got Avon. Then you flip the pages, a couple more pages. Again, we're in the introduction, the preface. And another writer refers to Shakespeare's Stratford Monument. So Stratford Monument on one page and Avon on another. You stick them together, presto, it's Stratford-on-Avon. And in fact, in the church in Stratford-on-Avon, there is a monument to Shakespeare. However, the original monument does not look like today's monument. Today's monument is a man with an upturned mustache and goatee, short beard, with a pen and paper, holding a pen and paper. But we have documentary evidence in 1634, which was not long after the folio came out, of a drawing. Somebody drew the monument, and it was not a man with an upturned mustache, pen and paper. Yeah, there you go, Mark. It was a man with a downward mustache, full beard, and he's holding a sack. And some of us think it was a wool sack because the Stratford man's father dealt in wool.
What does that have to do with writing?
Exactly. exactly.
There's how it's censored or fact checked.
Yeah.
400 years or maybe a couple hundred years later with the quill added. Big difference.
Yeah, and they've allegedly done this with a few other things as well. They've apprehended some works of art, some statues. They've re-chiseled some stuff. I've seen that they chiseled like an astronaut and a dinosaur on a super old cathedral, but it's very recent. And so people say, oh, this is proof that dinosaurs. It's like, no. They went in there, scraped off what was there because it was broke, and then re-chiseled something there. And so there's a couple examples of things like this, but this one seems much more deliberate, which is very interesting. It's not even a good job. They just copy-pasted a template and just replaced the sack with a pen and quill or a pen and paper.
And there's evidence that work was done in 1649, and that was after the English Civil War. And troops were known to be housed in that church. So, probably got roughed up somehow, and then they built a new one with somebody who was not even resembled the original monument.
I like this idea so much better. It's just a fluff. It's a folly. Somebody accidentally knocked it over, backed a horse into it or something, and it broke. And they're like, oh, we got to build this back from memory. He was holding a pen. It's just really funny. That's an interesting perspective. So what is it about this idea of Shakespeare not being who he really is that makes a big deal? I mean, I'm just curious. How does it impact our everyday life? How does it expand our reality?
Well, the great author, whoever he was, I mean, he is one of the titans of Western civilization, and we speak his words every day. He invented over 2,000 words and so many famous phrases.
Yeah,
like to be or not to be, to thine own self be true. Things like that we say and we don't even know, like foregone conclusion. And some of the words he invented: employer, assassination, zany, majestic, gossip, champion. These are just a few. So we are speaking his language. He is important. He totally transformed the theater at the time, which was very rudimentary. It was like morality plays and things like that. He created real characters. Hollywood would be bereft if he didn't, if he didn't exist. So we really need to honor the true man. And when you do that, when you finally come to the understanding that William Shakespeare, was a pen name, then you need to find who he was. And when you do, I believe he was the 17th Earl of Oxford, you're going to find in every single play and poem some aspect of his life, which is reflected in it. And that's what artists do. They reflect their lives in their works. Shakespeare supposedly is the only one who didn't do that. We don't have any life parallels at all with the Stratford man. What we do know about him is very pedestrian. He owed taxes. He was christened. His children were christened. We do, however, I have to give him this, he was involved in the theater. He was a theater shareholder, and he was a member of an acting company. But that is not proof of writing. So he was involved in the theater, I think, as a moneylender. He would probably loan an acting company money and then recoup it. In fact, that is the first record that we have of him involved with the theater. It was as receiving a payment with two other people for a performance before Queen Elizabeth. So he was allowed to receive the money, him and two actors. So the first connection is about money. Right. Actually, the very first record of him in London was as a moneylender. And in 1592, he loaned a man named Clayton so many pounds, and he was trying to get it back a few years later. So it's really the theater in the financial side, or just simply finance.
It's really interesting, too, how big of an impact that entertainment has on people's lives. We say this like life imitating art type of thing all the time. And it does seem that the character, whoever Shakespeare was, whoever wrote those works, made a massive impact on society and changed the direction and the course for those people at that time, especially with introducing new vernacular, which came with new ideas, new ways of constructing words. And that's an interesting approach to be able to portray that on a stage, have it be so attracting and appealing that then it takes off. But then it really, I don't want to say infests society, but it inspires society to create and to look at things differently. Just as your investigation into Shakespeare makes you look at, it puts a little tinge on things. You kind of put a little light on some alternate stuff as well. But it's just so interesting to me that this character that came through made such a big impact, because we see this. A lot of people feel that there's a deliberate apprehension of our entertainment today, and I don't disagree with this at all, from every form of it, from media, from entertainment, as far as like movies, TV, audio, any of that stuff goes, that it seems that there's a certain mass-produced element of it that is directly related to your perception, and perception management is its job. And so it's interesting that in the time of someone like Shakespeare, back in when they were doing these things, it seemed to be sort of an inspiring thing, and it inspired people to go out and create. Rather, as today, there seems to be observations made that it puts you down, it separates people, it divides things. It's just an interesting way that it's the same medium, but it's because it's so powerful that it's so effective. But in this day, for someone called Shakespeare to write these works, to have such a massive influence on that, to steer humanity the way that it did, it seems also that it perhaps could have been the catalyst for the way that we see it apprehended in the way that we do today, because it's so radical and influential on a society that it's easy to portray things in a new and interesting way that's so attractive that it steers the zeitgeist, it steers the mind of the society. It's very interesting.
One well-known Shakespeare professor, Harold Bloom, he wrote a book called Shakespeare in the Invention of the Human. So, I mean, that's a pretty high, high title.
And it seems also like more of a secret society sort of group of folks that wanted certain ideals out, or perhaps to steer a narrative or to introduce new concepts, all the things that it did, and it did successfully. And perhaps to do that, you just put it under a pen name, and you just take these ideas and these works and you insert them into a media, let's say, like the best media at the time, which would be these plays, as far as the attraction goes and the ability to set the message out and to have it actually propagate. So it's interesting that that would be an interesting way to do it. And all you would have to do is come up with a pen name, because now it's anonymous. You could have several authors contribute to this, several Oxford professors do it, let's say, to sort of infect people with inspiration.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the Shakespeare professors believe that Shakespeare was a consortium, that he collaborated with many different authors. I don't find that the case. I think I see one voice in all the works. But that's what happens when you don't have the real author.
That is true.
Right. And so they think he's a collaborator. And they also think, which is terrible, that he was a plagiarist. That's, again, another terrible consequence. When in fact, other writers were copying him and his famous lines and his characters. They were trying to emulate him. But the professor will tell you, oh, no, he was, taking from this guy, giving the totally wrong impression. That's another reason why I'm into it. It's a simple justice.
Yeah, you even pointed out here the first printed edition of Romeo and Juliet was a notorious private piracy. Actually, most of the earliest printed Shakespeare plays have imperfect or bad text, which suggests that they were also pirated. It's very interesting because it's a copy of a copy. It degradates, right? Like DNA, it just changes. You can tell that it's a copy just from its lack of clarity and awesomeness.
And it's an indication that the great author did not want his works printed.
That's a good point.
And I would say the reason is because he was a nobleman, and nobility did not publish during their lifetimes. That was a no-no. That would have been a stain on your name, especially someone like the Earl of Oxford, who I believe is a great author. He was the 17th Earl of Oxford. He was one of the oldest members of the nobility in England. So he had a great family name to protect. However, after a nobleman who was a creative author died, it would have been perfectly acceptable for his works to be printed with his name on it. But that did not happen for Shakespeare. And that really is the crux of the problem.
So what makes you think the 17th Earl of Oxford is Shakespeare, the most likely candidate, rather?
Well, somebody discovered, J. Thomas Looney, that the great author was the 17th Earl of Oxford. That's the title of his book. There we go, Mark.
Oh, Mark.
Shakespeare Identified. Yeah.
Yeah, highly recommend this book too.
We'll link it below. Thank you.
Yeah, that was in 1920. And really, he proved it. And yet, nobody in the Shakespeare world really knows it or accepts it. So, and that's really a pity. But the main thing is the Earl of Oxford, he was known as a playwright. He was a celebrated playwright, but he was also known to write anonymously. So, I mean, that's right there, number one. He also had a superlative education. He went to Oxford. He went to Cambridge when he was 8 years old. He was a prodigy. He had tutors. He went to law school after he graduated from Oxford when he was 16. Then he took a grand tour of Europe. He spent the most amount of time in Italy, where many of the plays are set. And there are just many lifetime parallels in all the plays, especially Hamlet. Hamlet is one of the most autobiographical. And that's the ironic thing, is that many professors believe that Hamlet was the great author. They think, and yet what's a description of Hamlet? He was a prince, right? He's a nobleman. He was a university student. He was a traveler. He had ship attacked by pirates and lost everything. His father died and his mother married very soon after. He loved the minister's daughter and married her. Well, he loved, and he killed a man. So all those characteristics apply to the Earl of Oxford.
This holiday season, you might be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you fuel up for brekkie, lunch, or dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. They just drop them at your door, people. You'll save time and eat well. You'll stay on track with your healthy lifestyle while taking all of your holiday to-dos in stride with good meals in the tum-tum. If you're too busy with all this stuff, these meals are easy to get done. They taste great. All you've got to do is head over to factormeals.com/expandingreality50 and use code expandingreality50 to get 50% off. That's code expandingreality50 at factormeals.com/expandingreality50 to get 50% off.
So, I mean, there's these great parallels. And there's another great phrase in Hamlet, I am but mad north-northwest. And nobody has been able to understand what that means. I am but mad north-northwest. But for the Earl of Oxford as the great author, it's perfectly understandable because he invested, I think, £3,000 in a voyage to discover the Northwest Passage. And it was a failure and he lost everything. So he could call himself but mad northwest.
That is those are ridiculously amazing parallels. So I could see why that would be the most likely candidate. Yes.
And then there's the sonnets, for example, which were Shakespeare's sonnets. So they would consider them love poems, but they're the great author's personal ruminations about the loves of his life, right? And one of them was a dark lady, a lady with dark hair and eyes. Well, the Earl of Oxford and the great author is very passionate about her, sexually passionate. And well, the Earl of Oxford was embroiled in a love affair with Anne Vavasor, who was a dark-haired lady. And she had a child by him, and he named the child Edward, Edward Vere. I mean, that's how much he loved this lady. And the queen actually threw him in the tower for this illicit affair. because he was married at the time to somebody else. So, I mean, it's perfect. I mean, everything fits.
Yeah, and now I'm wondering if he had neighbors, grew up down the street from a brother and sister named Romeo and Juliet. And, he just had all these characters. Somebody who cut his hair, was named Hamlet. And so it's all these characters from his actual life that then he just wrote these amazing stories about. So what accounts for all of the interesting language that he has come up with? Because I make up words all the time, but I don't know if I'm close to 2,000, probably, and not all of them are good. And, not all of them would influence society in a great way. I don't believe so, but I've still got plenty of time, so let's be fair. But how do we account for his ability to come up with that amount of vernacular?
Well, it comes from a terrific education. In fact, many of the words that he created are based on ancient Greek and Latin roots. So he was, he was a linguist as well as everything else, a philosopher. He knew history. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah,
yes, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, since you were just talking about, the Queen through Edward de Vere into the Tower for improper behavior at the court. There is the Sonnet 125 and the painting that goes with it. I just want to make sure that we cover that, since that was you just kind of referenced it, and I just don't want to go stray too far from that topic.
Yeah, very cool. Guys, check the show description for the video version of this. Of course, audio only audience. So there you go. Mark has been providing some amazing visuals for us as we've been going through this. And that's a beautiful painting describing what Katherine was just talking about.
That's Lady Anne Russell's wedding. And that's the Queen in the portable chariot.
Katherine, what do you think about bringing those back?
Good idea.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
The point that Mark was making, he was alluding to Sonnet 125. Okay.
It's not even electric.
And again, this is the great author's personal ruminations, right? And he said, "Were it aught to me, I bore the canopy with my extern, the outward honoring." So what does ought mean? It means anything. So he's basically saying, was it anything to me that I held the canopy over the Queen? I mean, that's the only explanation of canopy. When somebody of high rank or an important person holds one of the four poles, holding the Queen. So he's saying, was it anything to me? Like, meaning no big deal. Now, if the great author were the Stratford man, it would be the biggest deal of his life to be, honored, to be chosen to hold the canopy. But in Sonnet 125, it sounds like a bored courtier who's gone through it all.
Yeah. And all the people who are holding the...
Oh, they look like Shakespeare.
Yeah,
I'll be damned.
Yeah, they're all...
I mean, the same hairdo, the little beard, the little flavor saver down there, the little goatee, the outfit, the little furly deal. They all look just like Shakespeare, and the little pose and everything. That's fascinating.
Yeah, but they're all noblemen who are doing the lifting of the canopy. It's not the village baker.
Right. Yeah, it's got to be somebody who's held that pole. That's an important role. You don't want anybody getting squirrely or getting slippery hands, getting nervous.
So he's telling us that he is a courtier, in essence, the great author with this Sonnet 125. And he also, he calls himself gracious. Methinks no face so gracious is as mine. And that was a term applied to people of high rank, if they were, someone of grace. That's the way Shakespeare used the word. So, I mean, in many ways, he told his readers that he was of the nobility in the sonnets. But that seems to be something that, Orthodox Shakespeare scholars ignore.
Did the Earl and the Stratford Shakespeare, the William H. guy, the moneylender, did this dude and him live at the same time? Did they exist at the same time in the same place?
Yes.
Do you think then why do you think that William Shakespeare is the one credited for this? Do you think that the Earl just wanted nothing to do with it, and so he just found this dude in a play one time in the back room and was like, what's your name? William Shakespeare? Okay, you're goofy. Yeah. William Shakespeare wrote all this. Do you think it was something like that?
I don't.
It was just coincidence?
Well, the Stratford man emerged in London and on the theater scene in the 1590s. And the Earl of Oxford had been writing for several decades for the Queen, in my opinion, from the 1560s, even 1570s, 1580s. He was pretty much wrote everything by the time the Stratford man came in. I think that he knew of the Stratford man, and I think he even satirized him a little bit in a couple of the plays, Shakespeare plays. But I think that this was all contrived after both the Stratford man had died in 1616 and when the Earl of Oxford died, which was 1604. And it was in the book I showed you, the first folio, which is this year is the 400th anniversary of its printing. So it was contrived. There's many theories out there why they wanted to throw the authorship on the Stratford man. I think a good one is that the plays were somewhat political. And many of the characters, like, for example, Polonius in Hamlet, many historians see this as a lampooning of William Cecil, Lord Burleigh, who was the Queen's top minister. And if they believe that the great author were the Stratford man, they would not make this connection. If he was somebody who was known, if he was, yeah, there you go, Burleigh House. If it were known that the great author was a nobleman and courtier, then they're going to look at that character and see immediately that it is Lord Burleigh. I mean, that's one instance, but there are other instances of courtiers being, a little bit lampooned, a little bit made fun of in the plays. And that probably entertained Queen Elizabeth at the time.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
It didn't make some people happy. So I think that those people may have been behind it.
So I have sort of a fun connection for you that I would like to make now, if you don't mind. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Again, for the audio-only audience, check it out down here. Hang on. What is going on with this? Okay. Can you guys, what is happening? Okay. Can y'all see that? Okay. Here's another connection for you. So the Batman bust from the 60s show was of William Shakespeare. So one of the interesting connections that just to say about this means that, Bruce Wayne pushed that so that he could go and be his secret identity, Batman. Now, perhaps also this Earl created this character, Shakespeare, to then allude to the fact that he was something different. Or maybe they did this nod in the show to prove to that to you.
Wow.
Just a connection I made. I wanted to throw your way so that you can throw this in at presentations as well. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. So this is the original Batman series.
Yeah, so whenever he slid down the pole or whatever to open the pole up, he had a bust sitting there, and it was of this William Shakespeare right here. And so what's interesting about that, though, in my mind, I just, I analyze shit. So I made the connection that perhaps this also is an allude to the Shakespeare that we know is not necessarily the one that wrote everything, and that there's an alter ego perhaps involved.
That is fantastic.
It all comes back to comics. Boom.
And well, obviously, maybe one of the writers believed in this, and they threw that in there.
That's what I'm thinking. And now I'm thinking that, perhaps there are other things like that all over the place. Because that little statue of, Shakespeare's bust, that little thing is pretty popular. And not only in the Batman series right there, but you see it sort of dropped everywhere. So now perhaps it's an Easter egg to let us know that perhaps there's something else going on, that there's more to investigate whenever we see something like that.
Yes, it very well could be. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. Yeah, I thought it'd be fun. So what is one of the most mind-blowing takeaways from this? Like, why do you keep researching this and keep adding to this information? What are you hoping to find with this?
Well, to try and find the ultimate reason as to why the Earl of Oxford didn't get credit. I mean, part of it were probably the satirical portrayals of living people, but others, and I happen to be one of these people who think that the sonnets of Shakespeare, which were published in 1609, that they kind of told a story about the succession, that Queen Elizabeth had a child, and that this child really should be the real heir to the throne. But it's a little involved. It's in the last two chapters of my book. So it could have involved the succession, and certainly the succession would have been something important enough to cover up if you didn't want it to be known that there could be an actual natural heir to the throne.
Yes. It's fascinating because it's such great work, but you couldn't be famous because of these issues. It's so interesting. So if you had a time machine and you could go ask the Earl of Oxford anything you want, what's a conversation you'd have?
Yeah, I'd ask him, well, first of all, I'd ask him, where are your original play manuscripts? Because I don't believe we have read the actual Shakespeare plays. We've only read, as you mentioned earlier, pirated editions or imperfect copies of the plays. So I would like to know where his complete manuscripts are, number one.
I hope you find them, like a Dead Sea Scrolls for Shakespeare, like a Shakespeare Sea Scrolls, where it just answers all these questions for you.
Well,
I mentioned
this earlier that there is no manuscripts that have survived of a Shakespeare play. Nothing. It's zip. All we have is what was printed, right? But we don't have any of the originals. So if we had the originals, it would certainly clear up a lot of problems with the Shakespeare plays. What we're reading today, when you open up a Shakespeare play and start to read it, you're reading maybe 250 years of editing by very, very knowledgeable people, right? Great editors who are trying to figure out what some of these lines mean. And the reason why they can't figure it out, because we didn't have the original copy. That's another whole nother issue that needs to be dealt with. And that's why I say in the book, if we find those manuscripts, we'll read Shakespeare for the very first time.
Wow.
That's like the first thing I'd ask. And the second thing was, you must have made a deal for your anonymity, to carry on after your death. And what really was the deal?
Was it how long between when the plays were written to when they were started to be performed?
Well, I believe, and this is my opinion, but an Orthodox scholar will tell you different. He was writing when he was a teenager. And, that would be the 1560s and 1570s and 80s, and so his mature plays in the probably 1580s and 90s. And he was pretty much done at that point. The Earl of Oxford died in 1604.
Well, Katherine, you also make the point that, with the, about 40 plays over a 20-year period, he's cranking out world masterpieces every 6 months. That's
you have to believe that if he were the Stratford man.
Yeah.
Right. But if you believe that he was writing decades earlier, then it's all makes perfect sense. It's accountable, and you can see a progression. We don't even know the first Shakespeare play that was written, and we don't know the last Shakespeare play. It's all up in the air because we don't know the dates.
Well, speaking of that topic, in Mark Twain's study of this topic from 1910, he's talking about Shakespeare pronounced Venus and Adonis the first heir of his invention, apparently implying that it was his first effort at literary composition. So, and then what he has like no background. Then all of a sudden he just emerges in London in the, according to the traditional biography, in like 1594, and he's the praise never stops, and Richard III and King Lear and all this stuff just follows it, and all the sonnets. So he had no apprenticeship anywhere. Just he just emerges as a great poet and playwright from the boonies.
Right. Because, the years preceding when his first famous poem came out in 1593, Venus and Adonis, they consider those years lost. They call them the lost years for the Stratford man, because there's no record of him of any kind. What was he doing during this period? And that's where so much speculation comes when you look at the biographies, the traditional biographies of Shakespeare. They just invent it, and no evidence to support it.
Yeah, and Mark Twain's small book is it's only.
It's cool. Mark Twain took a swing at this.
Yeah,
that's
40,
really interesting.
Yeah, it's only 40 some pages, but he's really questioning this. None of this stuff adds up to the person that our high school teacher tells us about. I don't think he's being, really super sarcastic about it. He's just looking at it as, with his journalism, background. That how do you explain this? Like all of a sudden he's just here. He's actually only 30 years old, and with no education.
Yeah, what really got Mark Twain were the legal terms. There were a few books before Twain wrote his, and expounding on how deep he knew the law. And you can only get that from, law societies. And sometimes they speculate that Shakespeare was a law clerk, during the lost years, among many other speculations.
A lot of clerks go on to do great things. Patent clerks, right? Go on to create atom bombs and relativity.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because you said a word that rings the bell for me, and it's a lot of fun for this show. And so we, here really enjoy the art of creating critical thinking. And so we do that through really fun exercises into speculation, which is the word that you use. So let's speculate wildly, if you don't mind. I am very curious to see that perhaps part of his anonymity, do you think that it could be because the source of this brilliant wisdom, these revolutionary terms, this brilliant way of going about it? Like you said, there's lifetimes of work written in these that were achieved in such a small amount of time. It seems very profound. And not to deny the intelligence of one creature here on this earth, but is it possible that perhaps the anonymity is because of maybe sort of a John Smith situation or something, to where it was given to him, to where perhaps there's some extraterrestrial involvement, some paranormal activity going on, to where maybe he was a channel for something and then embodied this thing, came back with all this work. It was just like, I can't explain this to people, so it goes out under a pseudonym. It'd have been easier than getting burned at the stake or stoned or something like that to death, right? If that's the mode in which he received that stuff. So that's the question. Do you think it's even possible that it's sort of a confidence issue with him revealing this, because altruistically it was really channeled from a higher source?
I think he knew of his own greatness. I do, but I don't know.
You think some aliens came down, gave him tablets that were like, hey, this is the top plays in Zeta Reticuli, and if you take these, and then we've already converted them to Latin for you, so you're good. We asked the fun stuff here, so I didn't know. Or, the other question would be that this Earl was sort of Count of Saint Germain sort of a character that, lives for a very long time, maybe dipped in as the Earl for a little bit, created this awesome stuff, and then assumed another identity, perhaps. It's easy to fake a death probably back then, easier than today perhaps. But what I'm saying is that maybe there was some sort of divine, not even divine, just some freaky woo-woo going on, to where that the person that wrote this was so exceptional that it was sort of this ascended master sort of caliber of creature that was walking around here that delivered us these things and then just moved on, but did it with anonymity. I don't know. I just play with the ideas like this, Katherine. You've just got to, you don't have to play along, but that's the speculation. We love it.
I think he did it. He was able to do it from hard work and study. He sponsored acting companies. He held the lease on a theater. He was deeply involved in the theater all the way around. He sponsored playwrights. Other secretaries of him were Anthony Munday and John Lilly. They were playwrights. So he entertained the Queen. It's on record. He acted before the Queen. I am working on a paper that shows that Shakespeare plays were performed from the 1560s to the 1580s or 90s, before Queen Elizabeth. I mean, and she didn't go to the public theater. She only saw plays in her own premises with her courtiers. That's it, privately. So he was just deeply involved from the very beginning, and the Queen knew him. May have even had, it was rumored they had an affair. So I think several people knew that he was an author. He was writing these works.
Maybe
so I don't think it was, from outside source.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very cool. And I was just curious. I like to ask, if it was even considered. You're like, yeah, he could totally be an alien. I thought that's what you were going to say. You're going to come in here and be like, actually, Shakespeare was totally an alien, and that's what it was. Batman was his thing too. Well, then let me ask you this. What is something that you're looking forward to discovering next, moving forward with your research?
Well, I'm working on a new book. I hope to have it done maybe next year, about Shakespeare involving the art world. So that's going to be very interesting.
Can you give us a little taste, a little tease?
No.
Okay, that's fair. I like it. I like your style, Katherine. That's okay. I dig it. Well, then let me ask you this on a personal note then, before we wrap here. What gets you out of bed every morning? What gives you hope and keeps you motivated to move forward?
Well, it's having all these research papers to work on, and I have several going at the same time. I also have a couple other books going on at the same time, but sometimes when you do research, it leads you to something that you didn't expect. And so it's that, uncertainty, serendipity, I guess is the term, that is very, very fun. I get a lot of that.
It's awesome. Yeah, that vulnerable awareness where you're like, I don't know where this is leading, but I'm here for the ride. I love this. Yeah. Mark, what gets you out of bed every morning, man? What keeps you moving forward, gives you hope?
Just trying to get the best guests on the best shows. Beautiful.
Well, you're absolutely crushing it. We're grateful that you have put us in that category. So thank you so much.
It was just a good day for me.
That's a beautiful day, man. And I'm so grateful that you joined us for this and for the connection here. And so to that point, we will wrap it on this, guys. Thank you so much for this. This has been incredible. Of course, Katherine, your book, Shakespeare Suppressed, and all the other ways to find both of you will be located down in the show notes. I cannot thank you enough that I've learned something amazing here today, and I'm truly grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandon. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate the opportunity. And Katherine, it's great working with you again.
You too. Always.
You may think your credit score isn't a big deal, but when your credit score increases, your opportunities do too, like loan approvals and lower interest rates. Chime makes it easier to build credit with a secured Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card. You can use it everywhere Visa credit cards are accepted. Chime helps you build your credit score safely by using your own money to make everyday purchases and on-time payments with the safer credit building feature enabled. To apply, just open a Chime checking account with a $200 qualifying direct deposit. And don't stress, there's no annual fee or credit check required to apply and get started. Build your credit history and find new opportunities with Credit Builder today. Get started at chime.com/build. That's chime.com/build. The Chime Credit Builder Visa Credit Card is issued by Stride Bank N.A., member FDIC. Chime checking account and a $200 qualifying direct deposit required to apply. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply. Call 1-844-244-6363 for details. On-time payment history may have a positive impact on your credit score. Late payment may negatively impact your credit score. Results may vary.